So today is Saturday, the 4th of July 2020. Today is the day of the big unlocking in the UK. You can now go to the cinema, to the pub, to the restaurant, and you can have other people, one other household in your home legally for the first time since the lockdown started. So we're being allowed to gather in small numbers, socially distanced, but at least there's the start of being able to do something of what normal life, so-called normal life, used to look like. I wonder how much money you have saved over the last 3-4 months from not going to the pub, to restaurants, to the cinema, and all that sort of thing. But that's another topic for another video. What I want to focus on is that just that number 2, because from now you can have one other household. 2 households can meet under the same roof for the first time since the lockdown began, but only 2 households. Now that creates a bit of a problem for a church like ours and many others where we're used to getting people together in larger groups than that. We have our cell groups where up to maybe a dozen people can meet together in somebody's home to pray, to support each other, to read the Bible together, to explore what being a Christian means in day-to-day living. But we can't do that now. Only 2 households can gather. That could just be 2 people or 2 families. We can gather in church, but our numbers are restricted by church size, social gathering limits, and so on. So we're probably only going to be able to get 12 to 15 people together in our churches. So what happens to our small groups if you can only meet with maybe one other person under your roof? Well, the good news is that the Bible, Jesus himself says, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'm there with them. Ecclesiastes says that 2 is better than 1 because they have a better reward for their work. The Bible recognises throughout that being together with even just one other person can make such a massive difference. And there are loads of great examples of pairings in the Bible. Ruth and Naomi, who support each other through grief and tragedy and make an amazing pair of women who go through the most unimaginable times and yet support each other and see God's blessing on each other. Moses and Jethro. Jethro is a mentor to Moses who's still learning the ropes of leadership. There's David and Jonathan, great friends. Jonathan keeps David going whilst David is being chased around the country by King Saul. In the ministry of Paul and Silas, praising God in the prison. Paul and Barnabas going from place to place, discipling and strengthening the churches. Paul and Timothy, where Timothy is raised up as a new leader and comes into his calling and anointing as a leader in God's church. And there are loads and loads of other examples throughout the Bible of where 2 is powerful. 2 is where God can work, where God can bring blessing, where God can use us. And there are also examples of where people try to go it alone, it doesn't work. So in the story of Genesis, it's when Eve is on her own and the snake gets to her and temptation comes. It's where Saul is trying to do things on his own, offering worship rather than waiting for Samuel to come and do it with him, that his kingship and his character starts to fall apart. It's where Elijah thinks he's on his own and complains to God, I'm the only one left. That's when he falls into this massive depressive episode and thinks it's not worth living anymore. And God has to remind him that he's not on his own and that there are people with him. And he puts him together with Elisha, the new generation of prophets that God is going to use. So time and again in the Bible, we see that when people get isolated, it can be bad news, but when people work together in 2s, it can be good news. And if we're effectively being forced now or restricted into groups of 2, then what does that look like? Because it means that unless you're in a small group of 6 households and the weather holds, so you can meet outdoors, you're not going to be able to meet in that way for maybe months, maybe a year. But if we can meet in 2s, then what might that look like? Maybe it's a time to think about who is the other person or who's the other household I can meet with. And they don't have to be everything to you. Look at what happens with Paul. It's with Silas that he praises God. It's with Barnabas that he ministers. It's with Timothy that he encourages and helps Timothy to find his calling. So Saul actually pairs up with lots of different individuals for different purposes. So maybe now, as we go into this first step out of lockdown, it's a time to think, well, who is there that I want to have under my roof, or whose roof do I want to go under? Who is it that I can pray and worship with? Who is it I can be encouraged by, or who I can encourage? Who can I be mentored by? The sort of Jethro-Moses relationship, where there's somebody that can help me with the challenges that I'm facing. Who do I need to get alongside with to help me with the challenges that I'm facing? Like with Ruth and Naomi, maybe there's grief, maybe there's hardship, maybe that there's just somebody, a shoulder that you need to cry on, an arm around your shoulder, somebody who can hold on to you whilst you walk through whatever it is that you're going through. The Bible is full of examples where going in twos, where being in twos is such a source of strength. So in this time where maybe that's the only option available to us, of people that we can actually see face to face, people we can spend time with under our own roofs, have a think about who are those other people that you want to meet up with, to pray with, to learn with, to suffer with, to help along the road. As Jesus says, where 2 or 3 gather in my name, I am there with them. So may God help us in this season to discover the power of 2 and to discover his presence in that. Thanks for listening.